All right, everybody, I want to show you what we're going to be doing for our next and probably final project. What we're going to do for those of you at school and for those of you at home is we're going to do paper marbling. So we are going to take some cool supplies, learn how to marble it on paper, and then we're going to make them into little cool journals where you can draw stuff, have your friends sign it before the end of the year, or give it as a gift. So what we're going to use for those of us at school, we're going to use some colorful cardstock, which is just a thick paper. It's like construction paper, but not so, soft, kind of sturdy. We are going to be using enamel paints, although I am not so sure that nail polish won't also do the trick. Toothpicks and a bin of water. You can actually see this one's had a lot of use already. There's a lot of that paint stuck to the bottom. So I want to show you a demo of what this looks like so I don't have to do it when I see you in class on Wednesday. On Wednesday's class, we are going to jump right in and start doing this because we want to make sure every single one of you that's in school on Wednesday gets a chance to make one of these and have it dry in time for Friday. So what we're going to be using at school is enamel paint. Now, enamel paint works a lot the same way that nail polish does. It's usually used for people who want to paint little models of things like cars or things for dioramas. This paint sits on top of water. So what we're going to do is we're going to very carefully take a couple drops of this, put it into our bin of water, and set the paper on top of it. That ink, that paint is going to stick to the paper. And as we swish it around just a little bit, it's going to give you that cool marbling effect. Okay, so I'm going to get these out of my way. This is not stuff we want to touch too much with our hands if we can help it. So we are going to use toothpicks. Now, for those of you at home, I'm going to show you how you can do this as well. So don't feel like you can't do this. There's a couple of different options for you. All right. So the first thing I need to do is if I've got my blue piece of paper. Now, of course, you guys are going to put your names on this when you pick out what paper you want on Monday, tomorrow. But I need my piece of paper first. Okay, I've got that ready. I also need my bin of water. It's only got about an inch of water in it, which is fine. For those of you at home, you'll be doing something slightly different. So these are paints like if you've ever used nail polish, you need to shake them up so that all that bright yellow color in there doesn't separate. It's part of what makes this work. Okay, and I'm going to be supervising and helping you with this. So we're going to do the lid, lovely paint in there. And we're only going to use a toothpick to put this paint into the water. So actually, when I'm hanging out with you all, I'm going to be stirring these up because they do settle on the bottom. They're a little goopier on the bottom than they are on the top. That's totally normal. That's why this paint does its job. So as I stir this one up, that one's going to be ready. You're going to have the choice of using 2 or 3 colors. If you decide to use more than that, it's going to look a little chaotic and kind of gross on your paper. So I recommend using 3 colors or 2. Now, when you guys do this, you're not going to be able to spend a huge amount of time thinking and wondering what color you're going to use. So when you're in class and when you're in school, your setup's going to look a lot like this. You're going to have these little containers of this special paint with toothpicks sticking out of them. It's super important that if you're using yellow, you put the yellow toothpick back in there, or else you're going to have a big mess for somebody else. They're going to get the wrong color and they're not going to get what they wanted to. Okay, so I've got yellow and red. Let's go with this. Let's go with this white. I know I have a lot of white. Okay. So I've stirred these up. They're ready to go. So what I need to do is I'm going to very carefully hold this by the glass, and I'll be able to help you. And I'm going to drip a couple of this into the water. Can you see how it's starting to form on top? White may not have been the best color to start with, but I've got as much on there as I'm happy with. I'm going to put this back in the container. I'm going to get my yellow. And as the water moves, you can see it start to make those cool patterns. Take my yellow and do the same thing. Now, some of these paints are thicker than others, so some of them might fight you a little more. So I've got some yellow splots in there. And I'm going to take my red and put some of that in there as well. If I move my toothpick around, it starts to sort of make that water do its thing. Now you probably are gonna have enough ink in here to maybe do one. If I have the time to help you with two, we can definitely do two of these, but we're probably gonna start with one. I've got a bunch of ink sitting in my water right here at the top. That's what I'm gonna do with my paper. So before this spreads out too much, I'm gonna lay my paper down into it. And I'm gonna move my paper around just a little bit. It's gonna pick up that paint like a sponge. See how as I'm moving this around, that paint's no longer swirling around. It's actually sticking to my paper. If I move this, you can see this yellow blob scooting around. So when this is done, and I'll have these to my lovely kitchen grabbers. And when it's done, I'm gonna put it on a drying rack or on a tray or something like that. So scoot these fellas out of the way, excuse me, paints. I'm gonna take it out. And you never know what this is gonna look like, but this looks kind of cool. And I'm gonna just put it on here. There we go, as I bring my camera around. That's what this one looks like. And when it dries, those colors might get bigger, but I've got a lot of white. The yellow is mixed with the blue paper here. So I've got this weird glowy green. It looks like ghost boogers, I think, if I were to describe it. And I'll be bringing this into class once it's dried. It kind of has like a bit of a zombie kind of look to it. We got this red here mixing with the blue and this blobs of white kind of sticking around the edges, which is kind of awesome. So when this dries, those colors will become more vibrant like these ones, okay? So these are some ones that people have done in the past. This one's really cool. They're using a metallic on this. This one's got a very beautiful bright red on it. And eventually we'll make these in the book, but that is a thing for later. So if you're at home and you don't have enamel paint or a bin like this, that's fine. There's loads of different ways that you can do this. So I'm gonna move some of these things out of the way. I don't need my bin of water anymore. So I'm gonna put this somewhere else so it doesn't make a mess. I'm gonna keep using this same drying rack because I'm gonna use it for my next one. Scoot these guys out of the way. Okay, I'm gonna bring my drying rack closer to the camera. So in the same way that in the earlier parts of the year, we talked about how dyeing markers could be turned into paints. You can use dyeing markers to turn into liquid watercolors and do almost the same thing. Okay, so as I bring this closer, what I'm going to use is food coloring. You can also use dyeing markers if you have paint at home, but food coloring is really easy to work with. Okay, I'm going to pick out, I maybe not want to pick out blue. That's not going to work out so well, but here's green and here's pink. That'll make a really cool purple. I'm going to get a spray bottle of water, and if you can also use a wet sponge or paper towel and get that paper nice and wet. Really soggy. It's going to want to start to curl. It's going to go, going to get real mad. And then what I'm going to do, now if you're very brave, you can actually use droplets of this, but you can also use a toothpick. I'm going to very carefully, bloop. See how it makes a really cool design on there? Now, toothpick might be better because you get a little bit less color to work with. So here's another one of those things. I can try to direct this around before it soaks into the paper all the way. You see how I can kind of like move that ink around a little bit. This looks like a sinister red balloon. It's like the bad movie poster for It. Okay, here's a nice green. It's going to do something a little similar, but this might be a really bright green. It's hard to tell. Oof. Oof. Kablam. The sound effects definitely help if you haven't figured that out already. And if you're very careful, you can take a toothpick, and if you've got the right sort of container, this one doesn't quite fit, you could do like a cool sprinkle effect. And if you remember earlier in the year, when we talked about watercolor effects, we could put salt on this to make it look really cool. So if I go grab a salt shaker, before these puddles of water dry, I can put some of that on there and it'll make a cool crystally effect. So if you at home have food coloring, you have salt, and if you have a piece of paper that's a little bit on the thicker side, you can do this too. And if you don't have these materials, you certainly have it in your sort of artist's toolbox for later. So these both look very different. They are both still really cool. You know what? I'm going to try using that blue anyway. I feel like this needs another color. Ooh, that's very cool. Before this dries, I'm gonna like spread it around. Looks like a big old spider on my paper. Swirl it around with a toothpick. Have fun. Best thing to do with art is to just experiment. It looks like there's a giant blue spider on my paper. Depending on how you feel about spiders, that either might be a good thing or a bad thing. Now it's a crystal-y spider. So when these both dry, I'll bring them to school, which will be on Monday, and we will take a look at how they turned out, okay? So that's what we're doing. So when you come to school on Wednesday, maybe wear some clothes you don't care about too much, okay? It's not really on Miss Wales' hand. There's a little bit, but it'll come off with soap and water. Think of it like getting nail polish on you. It's not the best thing, but it's not the worst thing, okay? That's what we're doing. We're doing paper marbling, and then we're gonna make them into journals. The end.